Eddie Murphy and Mel B's teen Angel is celebrating a big milestone. Mel B takes to Instagram April 7th to wish Angel a happy 18th.
I am not saying that the trans women aren't women. I am just saying that those they got. You know what I mean?
Eddie Murphy has found himself in the middle of an unexpected storm, and now Dave Chappelle is stepping in to say it out loud. What should have been a private family matter has exploded into a public controversy, digging up old scandals, a narrative that refuses to stay buried. As tensions are rising and opinions are clashing, the spotlight is harsher than ever. But is this really about a past Eddie can't outrun? And why is Dave choosing to confront him now? Join us as we unveil how Dave Chappelle confronts Eddie Murphy for turning his daughter trans. Dave Chappelle blows Eddie Murphy's cover. When people talk about Eddie Murphy, they usually think of the comedian, the movie star, the man who's been making audiences laugh for decades. But behind all that fame, there's a story that's not as funny. It's a story that has followed him for almost 20 years, tied to Melanie Brown, better known as Mel B from the Spice Girls, and their daughter Angel. When the news got out that Eddie Murphy and Mel B's child has come out as transgender, the entertainment industry shook, not just because of the fact that Eddie didn't prevent it, but because of a shadow that's been following the actor and comedian around since the 90s, something he's been trying so unsuccessfully to bury. But before that, Dave Chappelle has been calling out Eddie for being unable to do what a father should. Dave is currently asking why so many celebrities suddenly have trans kids. A single glance at the list of celebrities whose children have transitioned makes Dave's question very reasonable. For something so controversial, the list is ridiculous. Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union, Cher, Robert De Niro, Sade, Marlon Wayans, Megan Fox, Angelina Jolie, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner, Elon Musk. All of these extremely popular people have either trans or non-binary kids, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The list actually goes way beyond just these names. Sure, one could dismiss this as all subjective, but let's be real, the numbers start to feel unusual after a while. When you see the same pattern come up again and again, it makes people think. Statistically, it doesn't seem like something that would just happen this often by chance. So it naturally raises a bigger question. What's really going on behind all of this? Some people have ruled out this pattern owing to the fact that these kids are just starving for attention, and that makes sense. Most celebrity parents are on top of their game, and they're never around for their kids. But Dave Chappelle doesn't think it's that simple. He believes it's deeper than that. According to Dave, there's an actual agenda in Hollywood not unlike an occult move. He claimed that there's a practice where celebrities have to sacrifice one of their own kids to the industry, either to unlock their next level of fame and wealth, or to bury something from their past. Now this sounds far-fetched and too vague, but the recent incidents seem to support this claim. And according to Dave, Eddie Murphy fits into that second category. There is something he's desperately trying to run away from, but in running away, he may have pushed his own child into it. Anyone who remembers Eddie in the 1990s would know that he was in the middle of a major scandal. He had been caught with a trans woman, and that woman later lost her life under very suspicious circumstances. Far from ending there were reports that Eddie allegedly paid hush money to her friends to hide something that if the public found out, would sink him and leave his career defining in shambles. And just like that, the whole story was buried, and Eddie bounced back. His career exploded, and no one asks him about that incident anymore. Fast forward a few years after that incident, and Eddie welcomes a child with Spice Girl, Mel B. The child was born female and named Angel Iris Murphy Brown, but Angel just came out as a trans man. So, when you look at it, Dave Chappelle's claims aren't empty words. His claim of the Hollywood agenda seems to be on-point claim of right about this alleged agenda. People are now asking whether Eddie's trans son is the price he paid to erase that scandal from history. In simpler words, Eddie caused this for himself. His daughter turning trans is a result of his own previous acts, which he can't seem to get away from. About Dave Chappelle's theory on this alleged agenda in Hollywood, it didn't settle easily. The moment he took his stand against it, they immediately slapped a label on him, calling him transphobic, all because he made some jokes in his specials. But Dave wasn't going to take that lying low. He fired back, saying a lot of his critics completely missed the point. When people asked why he would call out Eddie Murphy and the others, Dave said it was never about mocking trans individuals. It's about exposing the agenda, the contract every Hollywood celebrity seemed to have signed the second they want power. It's like if anyone wants to stay on top, if they don't want to get canceled, then you would have to play along and fall in line. And if they don't, they'll get erased. So Dave isn't hunting the actual transgender people. He's pointing up at the machine, the one that's forcing these celebrities to endorse something they don't even believe in unless they want to lose everything. And now Dave's comments are trending again after news broke that Eddie Murphy's child, Angel, came out as trans. Angel publicly changed his Instagram bio to he/him pronouns the second he turned 18. The majority of reports show that both Eddie and Mel Brown are in support of the decision, but there's something they're not saying out loud. There are reports that Eddie doesn't actually support this. He's forced to, because this is allegedly what he has to do to keep that skeleton from his 90s in his closet. But the skeleton is no longer in the closet. It's been laid bare for all to see. What exactly is this past experience that Eddie Murphy desperately wants to hide? The past catches up. In 1997, one of the biggest and definitely strangest scandals in Hollywood history happened when Eddie Murphy's car was stopped by police and he was found with a transsexual prostitute inside. The official story of what went down that night is strange enough, but there is also way more to the story, including the fact that a Hollywood fixer might have saved Eddie's career. And there was also a very suspicious death that many believe was very suspicious. One May 2nd at 4 a.m. in the morning, Eddie Murphy pulled over his Toyota Land Cruiser on Santa Monica Boulevard, an area known for transgender street workers, and picked up a trans woman who was 20 years old at the time. Her name was Shalimar Suley, and just recently, an old paparazzi clip surfaced showing the exact moment Eddie got pulled over by police with Shalimar sitting in the passenger seat. Shalimar was a Samoan-born trans woman who won Miss Island Queen in 1993. She later relocated to Los Angeles to become a fashion designer. However, she found no success in that fashion industry and had to quit. She tried other things, and when none of them worked out, she resorted to being a street worker. And after some time working the streets, the LAPD knew her by name. That's why the police were keeping an eye on her when they saw her get into Eddie's SUV. Moments later, the police stopped the car, interrogated Eddie, and arrested Shalimar because she had an outstanding warrant. Murphy wasn't charged with a crime, and he claimed he saw a woman out walking very late at night, decided to be a good Samaritan, and offered her a ride home and had no idea she was actually a trans prostitute. This Good Samaritan explanation was ridiculed and mocked, but Eddie claimed it was all just a big misunderstanding. But the controversy got more serious when tabloid newspapers came out with articles featuring other transsexual prostitutes who claimed they'd been with Eddie, and some went into graphic detail about what they'd done together. There was a huge media frenzy, with reporters and paparazzi swarming Shalimar as she was moved from jail to her court hearings. The articles didn't stop coming. One trans sex worker named Summer St. Cyr said that Eddie seems utterly obsessed with men dressed as women and the way they live. The Inquirer also had an interview with Shalimar herself, who said Eddie claimed that he was giving her a lift, made her laugh, but that he knew too well that she was a transsexual hooker. The articles were a complete disaster for Eddie's new family-friendly image, and he filed separate $5 million lawsuits against the tabloids, alleging that the papers had printed false statements from the transsexual prostitutes. But the papers stood by their stories, and they prepared to defend themselves against Eddie's lawsuits. Now, Eddie stuck to his Good Samaritan story and said he did nothing wrong. After all, he merely saw this person on the sidewalk looking rather restless, and all he did, he says, was offer them a ride home. And then Eddie's story got even messier because he claimed the reason he was out at 4 in the morning was because he was looking for a book to read. He said he was out on the Hollywood Strip at 4 a.m., looking for some material. A paper? That doesn't sound quite right. Eddie's then wife, Nicole Murphy, was out of the country at the time, and Eddie said he was bored and wanted to go out and find something to keep him busy, a good book to read. The story made zero sense then, and with all these new clips and testimonies surfacing, it sounds even more ridiculous now. And then Eddie found an unlikely ally, one who just might have saved him. He was a mysterious Hollywood fixer who was once one of the biggest gay porn stars in the industry. and he had a plan to save Eddie's reputation. The man was Paul Barassi. In 2001, Paul talked about his involvement in the Eddie transsexual scandal for an article titled "The Bagman," which appeared in the New Times LA and was awarded runner-up for Best Hard News Story at the LA Press Club Awards. Paul Barassi claimed that after reading about the Eddie Murphy scandal, he contacted Eddie's lawyer, Marty Singer, with a plan. He would find the trans sex workers who talked to the tabloids using his contacts in the porn world, then persuade them to say they were lying about their relationship with Eddie, destroying the credibility of the tabloid stories. According to Paul, his role was essentially to neutralize them. The tragedy that followed. A year after Eddie was caught with Shalimar in his car, a dog walker found her body on the sidewalk outside her apartment in Koreatown, LA. The official story was that she had worked late, locked herself out, and tried to access her fifth-floor apartment by climbing from the roof. She fell from the fifth floor and suffered head injuries. However, the autopsy found no substances or alcohol in her system, and they ruled her death an accident. But many people don't believe that explanation. Some believe she was unalived. Friends said she had been threatened after her encounter with Eddie and warned to keep quiet. Her brother claimed she became paranoid and believed someone was following her, and just hearing Eddie Murphy's name would send her into a panic. Carnal Candy even claimed outright that she had been killed. But here's the really sketchy part. Years later, a filmmaker working on a documentary about her spoke to a woman who lived in the same building. She said she heard a scream that night and saw a man dressed in black leaving the apartment. And that detail had a lot of people thinking maybe it wasn't just a fall, maybe someone pushed her. Shalomar's friends and family also didn't buy the official story. And one of her friends, a drag queen who went by the name Viva, told a reporter from the Village Voice that the cops refused to investigate. On top of that, there were reports circulating at the time that Shalimar was planning to sell her story and expose not just Eddie, but other Hollywood men who frequently picked up trans street workers. Shalimar had already talked to the National Enquirer while she was in jail, and the money they paid her went to posting her bail. In the interview, Shalimar called Eddie's story bogus and said he definitely had other intentions when he picked her up. And according to Shalimar, the only reason Eddie didn't get arrested for solicitation that night was because he was famous. She told the Enquirer, "It's unfair I went to jail while Eddie Murphy walked away scot-free." But that wasn't the end of it, because after Shalimar's story blew up, dozens of other trans women came forward with stories about their own encounters with Eddie. And in response, Eddie filed million-dollar lawsuits against the Globe, the National Enquirer, and even the New York Times, claiming they were publishing false info about him. And then came another strange twist. Eddie suddenly dropped the lawsuits he had filed against the tabloids. By that point, nearly every trans sex worker who had spoken to the press had signed sworn statements saying they had lied, which should have made his defamation case extremely strong. Instead, Eddie walked away and even agreed to pay the tabloids' legal fees, something that rarely happens in cases like this. One attorney described it as a complete victory for the tabloids. Some believe Eddie dropped the lawsuit simply to make the controversy disappear. Others speculate that the tabloids may have had additional witnesses who could have come forward in court. Either way, the scandal gradually faded after the lawsuits were dropped and Sully's death. It remains one of the strangest stories in Hollywood history, and a revealing look at how major celebrity scandals can be handled behind the scenes. And to this day, some believe there is still more to the story of what really happened the night Sully died. Following Dave Chappelle's claims of a Hollywood agenda, some people pointed to this story and claimed Eddie wanted to prevent history from repeating itself. Watching his own child turn transgender makes him remember his scandalous past. What many people don't know is that the relationship between Eddie and his son has never been fine to begin with. So what exactly is happening behind the scenes of Eddie Murphy's family? Family troubles. There's a lot more to the family that people know, and it's wild, just look at it. Mel B and Eddie weren't just a fling, at least not from her perspective. When they first met in 2006, she swore it was like being struck by lightning. In her own memoir, she described it as if destiny had walked into the room wearing Eddie Murphy's face. Their relationship moved very fast, and within a short time, they became almost inseparable, even going to the point of tattooing each other's names on their thighs. Eddie even went beyond that. He literally asked her father for permission to marry her. Now that was not some casual hookup energy, that was serious, but everything was about to spiral down. The pregnancy came, and the problems started. Mel had always insisted that this baby was planned, that Eddie wanted it as much as she did. And let's not forget that Eddie was already a father many times over by then. It's not like kids were new to him. But something shifted the second she was expecting a child. Mel said Eddie was suddenly controlling, paranoid about her leaving the house, obsessed with security. What started as passion quickly turned into a kind of golden cage, with Eddie holding the keys. And then the real heartbreak hit. When asked in an interview if he was excited about the baby, Eddie brushed it off with cold words. He blatantly said he didn't know whose child that was. It's even hard to imagine. Being pregnant, celebrating with the father of the child one moment, and then watching him deny the baby publicly the next. Fans were shocked, but Mel was devastated. And 2 years after Angel was born on Eddie's birthday, Mel said she had given up hope of her young daughter ever building a relationship with her father, because the actor didn't even want to meet his little girl. Even after their relationship ended, Eddie simply snubbed his ex and claimed Angel Iris couldn't be his, until a DNA test proved him to be her dad. And Mel has revealed the Hollywood star has no intention of ever meeting the child. Mel had to file a paternity suit just to make him acknowledge the obvious. The DNA didn't lie. Angel was Eddie Murphy's daughter. The court made him pay child support and cover medical expenses. But money doesn't equal love. And what Angel really lost out on was a father. For years, Eddie kept his distance, reportedly so bitter about the whole thing that he stayed away just to avoid dealing with Mel. More than staying away from his wife, he kept his distance from his child too, and that gave rise to a question. Was Dave Chappelle right when he said Eddie caused his daughter's transition? The absent father. Things in the family were strained, so strained that Angel even grew up believing Mel's then-husband, Stephen Belfonte, was her dad. That explains just how bad the situation was. Believing someone else was her dad when her dad was right there was horrible on many levels. By the time Eddie and Angel tried to reconnect when she was older, the damage was already written into her childhood, and there was hardly anything that could be done about it. And then came another layer, the one that threw Eddie off balance: Angel's transition. There were many reports saying Eddie Murphy struggled deeply with it. For a man who had been caught up in a public scandal years earlier after being pulled over with a trans woman in his car, the hypocrisy wasn't lost on anyone. Eddie brushed it off back in the 90s, claiming he was just giving a stranded person a ride, but the headlines painted a very different picture. And yet, when his own child began to live authentically in her own way, people close to the family said he wasn't there with open arms. Now this is where Dave Chappelle's claim settles in. Angel is 18 now, and what should have been a moment of independence and pride in becoming an adult is instead shadowed by the fact that her relationship with her father seems more fractured than ever. Apparently, Eddie never fully accepted her, not when she was a child, not when she began her transition, and not now. In fact, Eddie had denied her right from when she was still a fetus in her mother's womb, with absolutely no idea what was going on. Doesn't this mean Eddie is fully responsible for the child? And there's another part of this whole story that stings. Anyone who doesn't know Mel B well would assume she was just a struggling mother who depended on her husband's fame to make a name for herself. But that's not the case at all. Mel B was far from being a struggling woman trying to trap a celebrity for money. She was a Spice Girl, a global superstar with her own legacy and her own money. The idea that she chased Eddie for a check is simply laughable. What Mel B wanted, and what Angel deserved, was love, respect, and honesty. Instead, what they both got was denial, lawsuits, and a silence that reverberates loudly. Coming from such a well-to-do family, turning 18 should have been a clean slate for Angel, a chance to finally step into adulthood on her own terms, and maybe even rebuild with her father. But not only did the gap between her and Eddie not shorten, it seems even wider than ever. There are reports that while Eddie shows up proudly for his other children, the big blended family he parades at red carpets and holiday photos, Angel is the one who gets left out. She's the daughter who always seemed to live in the shadows, the one people had to ask about because she wasn't standing beside him in those family portraits. Close friends of the family have reported that Eddie, who has been hyper-aware of his public image for decades, didn't quite know how to handle having a transgender son. And the hypocrisy wasn't lost on fans. The same man caught in a scandal with a trans woman years ago couldn't fully embrace his own child's identity. People called it cowardice, others called it pride, but either way, the distance between the father and child never closed. What makes it sting even more is how much Mel B has had to fight alone. For years, she carried the role of both mother and father, protecting Angel while fighting her own battles. A toxic marriage, financial setbacks, and public scrutiny that never really gave her a break. Through it all, Angel stayed mostly out of the spotlight. But once her transition became public knowledge, Eddie's silence spoke volumes. For Angel, the fight hasn't been about child support or recognition. It's been about love, acceptance, and belonging. And whether Eddie ever finds it in himself to bridge that gap, one thing's for sure. Angel's story has already redefined his legacy in ways he probably never wanted. So here there's Eddie Murphy, who's still being side-eyed by the public. Fans can forgive a lot of things, but being absent for his child, rejecting them for who they are, when he caused it, and rewriting history about your relationship with their mother, that's a wound that doesn't heal with a paycheck. The irony is rather strange. Eddie Murphy, a man who made his career out of making people laugh, had left his own child carrying the weight of his absence, something he could have prevented. Regardless of Eddie's support, Angel is growing into adulthood. The question that lingers is, will Eddie ever face the truth, not just of a DNA test, but of the responsibility he tried to run from all those years ago? Or will he remain in denial? Whichever choice he makes, the public is watching. Did Eddie Murphy bring this on himself? And is Hollywood sponsoring the agenda Dave Chappelle claimed? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.